Hey everyone, my name is Carlos Clemenz and I'm your talking aficionado. This is my new podcast. I'm kind of delving into something new and exciting here. I love talking. I love watching TV. I love watching movies, entertainment. I work in entertainment. And I thought this would be an incredible way to get a lot of my thoughts out of my brain. And last night, February 9th, the Academy Awards aired on ABC, and it was actually probably one of the most unexpected shows I have seen in a very long time. Now, let me break that down. It was probably the show that everybody knew exactly who was going to win. There really wasn't any upsets. There really wasn't any major surprises except for Best Picture, which went to Parasite, but we'll get that to in a minute. Let's talk about my favorite things about the Academy Awards last night. So to begin with, the red carpet seemed less crowded, and if you're watching any of the shows like E! News or the ABC's red carpet, you saw that it looked less crowded because they actually had created a backway alley within the carpet for people's families and stuff, like other guests, regular, what we would call industry probably people, because it's an invite-only event, but they would go through the back of the carpet while the celebrities and nominees would go through the front, which actually made for a much nicer transition and visually stimulating red carpet, because you really could focus on things without being like, oh my god, this is so crowded. So that was a really cool new feature they kind of added to the red carpet. The next things, let's talk about the winners, the big winners of the night. And that was Renee Zellweger for Judy, which was one of the most phenomenal performances, I think, of her career. And really, she brought like such a human-like quality to Judy, who has always had sort of a tumultuous history in Hollywood, and what might she have been like and what her end of her life was like. And I know for a fact that many people say that this is exactly what Judy was like at the end of her life, which is where this movie takes place. It's about Judy Garland in London doing her last performances on stage ever. And I have to say, Renee Zellweger really blew it out of the park. There was really no competition. I mean, of course, you had Charlize Theron, who did a phenomenal job as Megyn Kelly, and you also had Cynthia Erivo for Harriet, which was the first time the story of Harriet Tubman had ever been told, but they just weren't as strong performances and as transformative in a character as Renee did in Judy. So she totally, absolutely deserved to win that Oscar last night. And it is also her second Oscar. She had won back in 2003, 2004 for Cold Mountain. So it's been 17 years since she's been at the Oscars as a nominee and now a second-time winner, which puts her in a category, a whole new category, because there's not that many actors and actresses who have won 2 Oscars. You know, we have Tom Hanks and why am I blanking right now? I should know this, but there's not a Denzel Washington. There's not a huge amount of people that have won 2 Academy Awards in acting. Now you have to think that the Academy Awards have been going on for 92 years, so there's really not a lot of room. Hilary Swank, for example, to win 2, and if you do, that's kind of a remarkable thing. And if you're Meryl Streep and you have 3, that's even better. And if you're Katharine Hepburn, you're exceptional because you have 4. And if you're Walt Disney, well, you just have 20 plus, and we stop counting. But it's really, really a remarkable night for that film last night, because it was also only nominated for that and for Best Visual Costume. I'm sorry, not costume. Oh my God. It's been a long night. I've been researching everything I want to talk about. For makeup, because her makeup was extraordinary. And then we have for Best Supporting Actor, we had Brad Pitt, who won for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And what was interesting about this was that he is already a winner. He had won back in 2013 for 12 Years a Slave as a producer, but this is the first time he's won as an actor, and he's been in the industry for about 30 plus years or something like that. So this was really, really kind of like a deserved Oscar. It almost kind of felt the same way when Leonardo DiCaprio got his. It was sort of like it's overdue. He's done his dues. He's worked a lot, and this character was actually, I was not a fan of the movie per se. I thought the movie moved at a very slow pace. Again, we'll break the movies down in a bit, but his performance was very good, and in his speech he thanked a lot of the stunt performers that work in films. And a big question has been whether stunt performers should have a category at the Academy Awards, and I'm not sure that is a thing. Not because I don't appreciate and love their work, because we've all worked on sets with stunt performers and they do really a phenomenal job, but they're really an extension of the actor who is performing the scene. They're not really acting while they are part of the scene. So I don't know, it's kind of a tricky thing. But SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, has recognized him. They do have a stunt ensemble SAG award that goes to them. So maybe in the future, but I don't foresee it anytime soon. Another winner of the night was Joaquin Phoenix for The Joker, and he also gave one of those performances of a lifetime where you just, how can you not give him the Academy Award? It was like absolutely a phenomenal performance. I had issues with the movie, but again, we'll talk about that in a minute. I just want to give you the top 5 things that won, because that's the most important. We had Laura Dern, who won for Marriage Story, and that was actually kind of also incredible because she's been kind of a sweetheart darling of award season since Big Little Lies came out 3 years ago now. She took home the Emmy for that. She took home the Golden Globe. She also now is taking home the Oscar, and she had her mom in the audience, and that was really sweet and cute, and you can go on YouTube and watch it. But what was interesting about that for me was that I found that performance, while it was great in A Marriage Story, which you can watch on Netflix, she didn't give me anything new per se. I think we all love her because she does something really well, and I think it was a very similar performance as in Big Little Lies. I think it was an overpowerful woman, a powerful career. She had to show her strength. It just read very much like the same character for me. But again, she has been in Hollywood. I think her first movie was when she was 6 years old, so she has been here for quite some time. So again, I think it was also her time. And for Best Picture, we have Parasite, which is the movie of the year. It won Best Foreign Film. Oh, well, it's got a new title now. It's Best International Film, not Best Foreign Film. And it also won Best Picture. So it took 2 of the biggest honors of the night. And I had a little issue with the fact that if you are nominated in a foreign film category, you should not be included in the main Best Picture contender, because that's, to me, kind of a little bit of double dipping in a sense. I mean, it was a phenomenal movie, but I question whether, if you're considering movies for an international standpoint, why they have to be in the Best Picture category. Because not only why have an international category, just nominate 9 films or up to 10 films just worldwide. There's no need for that other category. That's been my thought since and this was the case with Roma, and I'm Mexican and I was rooting for Roma too, but I did not think that it should have been considered in the Best picture category if it's in the international. And at that point, it was in the foreign film category. Same with Amour, and so there's a lot of films that I question whether or not they should be in both categories. But anyway, I digress. So last night's producers were Stephanie Allen and Lynette Howell. They were a new duo that they had introduced, and I actually think they brought some really cool and interesting ideas. And you can see them even in how they the governor's ball was sort of run, and you can look up all that on YouTube. But even the class photo looked very different. Everything was a little bit more clean, a little bit more streamlined, I thought. And I don't know if it's because of budget cuts, because the Academy Museum is coming out, which will open December 14th, as it was announced last night. But anyway, let's talk about that opening number, okay? I mean, finally, we had a great musical opening number. And it was really great. I think for years, I've been wanting a musical number to open the show, because we've had comedians. We had Ellen, we had Jimmy Kimmel, we had Chris Rock. I mean, there hasn't been an incredible opening number since Hugh Jackman in 2009, I think. That was my favorite year. And so I had been asking for this. But my thing with this one was, I know, here comes the issues. For me, I didn't think that it connected the movies entirely to the opening number. Meaning, yes, she came out, she put the sweater on like it was a good day in the neighborhood, but it seemed very discombobulated, and it also seemed very self-serving to Janelle Monáe, who was the singer, and actually Billy Porter joins her on stage a little, I think about 2 minutes into the opening thing. And what I mean by that is that it was a vehicle for her to showcase her voice, to showcase her talent, and that was interesting to watch. I didn't think it served the purpose of inviting me sort of into the night of movies, of celebrating that magic that is the movies, of dreaming in gold, and these are all past Academy Awards sort of logos and titles they put on the show. And so I always felt that was sort of what you were aiming to have, and I feel like it missed the mark a little bit last night on that. I thought she had a beautiful voice. I thought the duet with Billy Porter was phenomenal, but I just didn't think it wasn't the right vehicle to open the show. For me, personally, I just did not. I liked it, but I just didn't like it as an opening. And then it was sort of, I don't know, for me it just seemed discombobulated and not cohesive enough. And this is part of the reason I don't think that the Oscars cannot have a host. I mean, you don't have anyone to capitalize on that moment that is like, you're supposed to be having 1 billion people watch this show, so you sort of want someone to lead you in and invite you into this world that seems very elite and very glamorous, and it's not as obtainable as it seems. So I just felt that it missed the mark for me. And by the way, it was followed by an odd comedy set of about 3+ minutes of Steve Martin and Chris Rock just babbling. I thought just filling time, which for a show that is trying to cut back time, there was a lot of moments throughout the night that I felt were a little odd, like that seemed like wasteful. And then you had speeches being cut off because of moments like this. I think if you want comedians to open the show, then have Chris Rock and Steve Martin open the show. Don't do an opening number. If you're going to do an opening number, then it should be introduced by someone who is a host that can sing and dance and act and do the whole thing. But to break it up with an opening number that then you have 2 comedians coming out and sort of making fun of the room, and the Amazon guy, it just seemed it was a little off-putting for me. Not to mention that there were very rough transitions between the categories and introductions. And there was this lack of cohesion throughout the whole show. This wasn't just for the opening number, which, that I think that having a ringleader, aka a host, is crucial for that. And actually, you had not Billy Porter, which I would have loved to have hosted, but you had Billy Crystal on Jimmy Kimmel a few nights before the Academy Awards, reinforcing this fact that yes, you do need a host, and he gave great examples of why you need someone there to sort of move the night along, because at moments last night it was just like, oh my god, here's another category. It just seemed very self-serving in a way that did not serve the viewer, because these shows are obviously done for the viewer. When you're in those theaters, it doesn't feel the same way. Trust me, I've been to the Emmys, I've been to the Tonys. What you're seeing as an audience member in those theaters is not the same as you're seeing on TV. So we get a completely different experience, and I felt that the experience we got yesterday, well, it was good for a hostless Oscars. It just didn't move in the right direction for me. And I'm happy to, hear your comments and thoughts. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carlos Clemenz. That's CarlosClemenz. But I was not a huge fan of how the show opened. I am still adamant that the show needs a host. This is the Academy Awards. You need to have a host. I find it incredibly difficult to follow along when you have all sorts of presenters coming from the left, from the right. I mean, someone needs to guide you through the night, and there was no better example of the show than having people where I think it missed the marks is having people introduce other actors. Like, why are you wasting time like that? That is totally time wasted. You easily could have earned 3 to 5 minutes from cutting people coming out to be like, and now Jane Fonda to present this award. Like, it just didn't make any sense for me. And I think it was trying to fill the role of that host, which would be easier. But anyway, Parasite, after winning Best Picture, was cut off. And it wasn't until you heard and saw a cutaway to Charlize Theron and Tom Hanks and all of the people in the front row chanting to get the lights back up so that they would have more time to talk about, their thank you speeches. And the issue with me and cutting people off is that, yes, this is a TV show, but it's also sort of this once-in-a-lifetime moment for these winners, and you wait all of your life as a filmmaker or an actor or a producer or a cinematographer or whatever it is, a short film creator, a documentarian, a music person, a writer. I mean, you should have more than 80 seconds. And, they give that to the best actor, best actress, and supporting actor and actress. And, I find it kind of, I know you have to move it along. The show can't be 4 hours, but I think that there needs to be a better understanding of what's an appropriate time to give them. And especially if they're giving a good message, if they're thanking their dog, the cousin, the rug, and, I don't know. I think it depends, but luckily they do have a thank you cam in the back, so you can get your thank yous in and catch them on YouTube and, at the Academy website, OSCARS.com. But it's not as special as when you're on stage in front of your peers in the world. And it really is sometimes a once-in-a-lifetime moment, and you will never be on that stage again as a winner. You might be there as a presenter or a host or, various ways to be on the Oscar stage. But to win the coveted trophy that is the Oscar, I think is special. And so the Academy has to find a way to honor that and sort of hone it in and let it be that moment, whether it's, giving someone 3 minutes, giving someone 2 minutes, I think a lot that time to those winners, because some of them have really great things to say. And especially you had the woman who won for composing the music for Joker. And, I thought she had a great message about if you're a young girl and you hear music in your heart and you should, go for it and put it out there because we need to hear your voice. And I thought that's a great moment. And, luckily they didn't throw her the music, but, those are the moments that you live for. Now, moving on to something else that I thought was very interesting. Eminem. That whole thing, I mean, was it cool? Sure. He is an Oscar winner, but it just seemed ill-fitting and like it didn't make any sense. Yes, I understand it's celebrating like music and movies and odd people sort of sometimes winning things like you don't expect, and like you don't expect Eminem to win an Oscar. But that performance was just I felt it was very out of the blue. I didn't feel it connected to anything really, like except for being in the moment. There's something about the song. I don't know the song all the way, but it's like something about being in the movement, the moment, and da-da-da-da-da. But I found it confusing, and like it just killed time that could have been allotted to something else. Like, I thought this was a missed opportunity to maybe take those 5 minutes of that performance to maybe highlight all the women who directed films this year, This would have been a great opportunity to maybe do a package on all the movies that hit theaters, or had wide releases. I mean, I got that it was the impact of music and that anyone could win an Oscar, but like that just didn't make any sense to me. I thought that's where you would put a fantastic package on women who have been omitted from the directing category for years, for decades, And, well, yes, because Catherine Bigelow is the only and last woman to ever win an Oscar for directing. So I thought it was a missed opportunity for something bigger and greater. Again, just questioning why that happened. And I just don't understand it. It was not the Grammys. This was not the BET Awards. This is the Academy Awards. And I found it odd. It didn't make sense within the realm of the show as a whole for myself. Now, something else that I really, really loved was Elsa. Who we know as Elsa, but it's Idina Menzel singing with all the other Elsas of the world, which I found actually to be super remarkably like unique and interesting and very cool. And they had only rehearsed since Friday before the Oscars this past Sunday. And I thought that whole thing put together this sort of human experience of going to the movies and connecting it to the world, because you had Latin America represented, you had China. I mean, you had all of the Elsas of the world, and not all of them. There's obviously that movie has been translated into 42 languages, I think they said last night, or 43. Don't quote me on that, but it's something in the 40 plus range. And so that was really, really I thought the Academy needs more performances like that. Something that unites everybody. Because when you go to the movies, it's about that human connection. It's about connecting to a feeling universally. And I think if you feel represented because there's someone on the stage that comes from where you come from, that looks like how you look, I think that's beautiful. So that was something I really love. And I also really liked Elton John's performance. He wrote this song for Rocket Man, which I thought should have been a Best Picture contender, because that movie was phenomenal. I think it just sadly came out too early during award season, movie debuts. But his performance was absolutely incredible. And Cynthia Erivo's performance was really good. She has the voice of an angel. It is like butter, as Miss Barbara Streisand would say. But to me, it was a beautiful song. It was a storytelling song. about Harriet Tubman's journey, and it was beautiful. There was something missing. I sort of would have liked, I thought she looked beautiful. I don't know what it was. I just felt like sound-wise it was stunning, but I think when you're coming out of The Color Purple from Broadway and you have that epic performance at the Tonys from The Color Purple, I don't know, I guess I wanted it to be more extra, but it was beautiful, and I think it served the right purpose to highlight Harriet Tubman. So that was really cool. And let's see, what else? What are my notes? I know I have so many notes. Joaquin. So back to the speeches. So Joaquin Phoenix had this speech, and it went on for a minute, and it had me thinking. It was sort of like when Viola Davis won an Emmy, back in, and I was actually at that Emmy Awards. It was my first Emmys that I had attended when Viola Davis won her Emmy for How to Get Away with Murder. But it had me remembering this moment where you're sort of thinking, where are they going with this? Like, I'm confused, because if you recall, and if you don't, I suggest you get on YouTube and Google Viola Davis Emmy winning speech, also because she made history and she's the first Black woman to win a Best Actress Emmy in a drama category. But anyway, she was talking about white women and being over the fence, and it was just one of those speeches where you sort of she had to wrap it in a little bow at the end, and so you have to kind of wait for that. And I felt very much like Joaquin Phoenix's speech was very much like that you were sort of questioning a little bit as to where they're going with it. But he did tie it up, and he tied it up kind of beautifully, ultimately summing it up in a 4+ minute speech, where he said, one of my favorite things he said was, I think whether we're talking about gender inequality or racism or queer rights or indigenous rights or animal rights, we're talking about the right against injustice, end of quote. So I thought, what a beautiful way to be political without actually, because I know people hate when actors get political and when the speeches get too political, but I think we're at a very crucial time. That's another episode, but anyway, I thought it was beautifully well done, and it came, I mean, I felt like it was a little bit rambling, but at the end when he says this, I was just like, I get it, I got it. It was memorable, let's say it that way. And it was the same with Renee. It was a beautiful speech, but again, very long. I have to say that this past year of conversation celebrating Judy Garland across generations and across cultures has been a really cool reminder that it's our heroes that unite us now. And I thought that, because she said that, sorry, that was a quote, was very cool, because it is so true. Heroes totally unite us, and you could see that with Kobe Bryant. I mean, after he passed away in that very tragic accident, I think people felt the fragility of life because he was a hero, because his life meant something. So I think Judy is important because she means something to people. She continues to mean something to people. So I thought that in her speech was really good. But again, she had to wrap it up in a bow for me. It was going on a little too long, and thinking, again, I think she thanked, although she did thank her parents, who were immigrants, and I thought that was a subtle way to talk about immigration in a personal level, especially with a white actress. So very cool, I thought. And then there was the big win of the night, which was Parasite, which again won Best International Film, and the Best Director also went to that film. And what was so interesting was that for me, this was probably the most predictable year ever. As I was saying earlier, most of the movies had a repetitive factor. And let me break down what that means, because a lot of the actors were in several movies that were all nominated. I mean, you had Margot Robbie in Bombshell and also in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which were both nominated movies and performances. And then you had Scarlett Johansson, who was, by the way, joining a select group of people with 2 nominations in one night, like Sigourney Weaver, who has also been nominated in 2 categories on the same year. But anyway, she was in 2 movies too. She was in Jojo Rabbit, which was nominated also, and Marriage Story, which was also nominated. And you had Adam Driver, who was in Star Wars and was also in Marriage Story. And you had Laura Dern in Little Women and Marriage Story. I mean, it was it's sort of a lot of repetition. You had Robert De Niro in The Irishman, and you also had him in The Joker. It was just like no fresh faces, really. If you look at years past, you always have a fresh face something. And the reason I think Parasite won last night was because it was the most fresh idea and the newest people on the platform of award season. You had never seen these people. You didn't know this story. You hadn't seen this story. And I think that's why it won. And I mean, to great surprise, to great no surprise, I should say, because it really was, I think, the freshest thing out of all the movies nominated. Because you look at something like 1917, which is a war movie, my favorite picture of the night, by the way. I really was rooting for 1917, and if you have not seen it, I suggest you get to the movies before they take it out. I know it's still playing at some AMCs, but many compared that film to Saving Private Ryan because it was so well done. It really was. In talking with some friends and stuff, I know that they said that the plot didn't move along as quickly as some of the other films, but I thought visually speaking and in what it said towards the end was a beautiful, beautiful story. But in the sense of the story, like Marriage Story, I thought that was just like a retelling of Kramer versus Kramer with Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman back in the 70s. I think it just had a fresher take on it, but it's still 2 actors and a divorce. And, was it as realistic as it probably is in real life? No. I was reading this article about, 2 actors, one who has an off-Broadway show and one who's on TV, would they be living the life these people live on the screen in this particular movie? And the truth is no. An off-Broadway show, you're making like $100, so no, you wouldn't. So I didn't find it as realistic. And Laura Dern playing a lawyer, she did a great job, but I just found it a very similar performance in my eyes to her character in Big Little Lies, which she did take home again the Emmy and the Golden Globe for. But again, she's playing this high-level powered woman, and again, she's also in Little Women. She wasn't nominated for Little Women, but it's this repetitive nature of I don't know what's happening. There's so much talent, but we keep repeating actors in movies. And Little Women, while I liked the film, sadly, it's been done before. Was it fresh and new? Like, sure, because it had new actors, but I liked it a lot. It's just, there were wonderful parts that were there, but ultimately it was not the freshest idea in the pack either, mostly because it's been done, I think, 6 or 7 times. Now, something that was sort of more on the fresh side was Ford versus Ferrari. And that was actually a really cool story. And I'm sad because it just didn't get enough campaigning. I saw it at the movies, and it was just this beautiful story about propelling your dream and your career based on your moral compass and what you like and what you think is right. And I don't know, it's just a very beautiful, beautiful story. And if you have a chance to rent it, I know it might be playing still at some theaters, but it might not. But you should definitely check it out. Again, that was Ford versus Ferrari. And I know many people didn't know about it, and it just was something truly, it was just a very incredible story. Because it made you feel something. At the end you felt something. He was he becomes a hero at the end of the movie. And I don't want to give it too much away, so that I want you to watch it. But let's talk about The Irishman. Again, perhaps it's another vehicle of a movie to wrap up a career of many icons of this mob, mentality movie thing. You had Al Pacino, you had De Niro, you had Joe Pesci, Martin Scorsese. I mean, the movie itself was almost as long as Gone with the Wind, and I don't think people have that kind of attention span anymore. And at times, it felt overly gratuitous. I mean, I liked the film a lot, don't get me wrong, but I think it needed some editing. And I think if it was not a Martin Scorsese film, I don't think we would have seen it at the Oscars. And it definitely, to me, needed some editing. And it did not take any gold last night at the Oscars, sadly. But it lives on Netflix if you have 3 hours and you'd like to go watch it. I know Martin Scorsese warned you not to watch it on your phone, so make sure you watch it on the big screen, meaning your television set. And another film that was probably a little more fresh than the others was Jojo Rabbit, because it had a fresh take on sort of a very serious topic. I mean, you're talking about Nazi Germany, and I thought it was looking at it through a new lens, sort of, that gave it a fresh idea. And it also introduced new children to Hollywood who I see having very, very bright futures ahead of them, like Roman Griffin and Archie Yates. I mean, they were absolutely phenomenal performances. Those two kids, I thought for sure Roman Griffin was going to get a nomination as a young actor. He's about to turn 13 now, but I thought his performance was really raw and really interesting to watch. So if you get a chance to, it was one of my favorite movies of the season, Jojo Rabbit. And then moving on to like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that was a classic Hollywood story about a real subject, done beautifully well, but also beautifully slow for me. I mean, I could not get into it. It took me 2 tries to finish the whole movie because I make it my goal to watch all of the Best Picture nominees, Best Actor nominated films, except I did not get to the Antonio Banderas film because it just wasn't released where I was at. But I just could not get into it, and not for nothing, but it kind of reminisced of, Hollywood loves movies about itself. So it reminded me of La La Land and The Artist, and sort of these movies that work within Hollywood. And probably why I think Sunset Boulevard next year will dominate the award circuit if it's done very, very well, because I think that would be the vehicle for Glenn Close to take home her Oscar, but also because it's a movie about Hollywood and Mr. DeMille, and it's something that Hollywood really, really, really loves. So again, not the freshest idea in the pack. And it was the 9th film from Quentin Tarantino, which I thought, again, it's probably why that film is at the Oscars. I mean, it's not a bad film. It's just, again, just very slow for me. Attention span. It's all about attention span. And then, of course, we had The Joker, which was another film that, if you want an Oscar, you lose your marbles and inhabit the character of the Joker in A Tumultuous Life. And, of course, you can also get an Oscar if you do it as great as, like, Heath Ledger and Joaquin Phoenix did, which both of them have won now an Oscar for playing the same character, different versions of the character, but ideally the same version. But the film as a whole, I had a lot of issues with, because I find that, oh my God, I don't want to get too political, but I find that when you are a white male with issues and you don't just go kill everyone because you feel unseen. And of course it was painful to watch that movie, of course, because you feel for this guy, but it didn't seem like the proper message to be sending out when you have a bunch of white men who are young, who feel unseen, going into school shootings and people around the country. It seemed like the film created a hero out of someone with very, very heavy mental health issues. And it didn't really address those issues, besides a few scenes with a social worker who just says to the character of the Joker, you're right, we don't have enough resources to help you. So I often think that if you're telling movies and telling stories, you should highlight, of course, the mental illness, which this movie does, and the violence, of course it does, but I don't think it highlighted how to properly get help. It just sort of went into violence, and I found that troubling for me. And I mean, again, great movie. He won the Oscar, well deserved. Just trouble with the movie's storyline and concept for myself. And if we move on to Parasite, I mean, that out of the 9 films nominated was probably the freshest film. It was full of unknowns, a director with a vision, a film with a story we haven't yet seen. So winning Best Picture and Best International Film at the Oscar was definitely the right call. It made audiences and Academy voters see something completely fresh, and I think that's why it won, and I think that's why it was deserving to win. Again, my only issue is that I don't think it should have been in both of the categories, but that's, I think, for later, that's for Academy voters and members to decide. But, if they're okay with it, I think then we're going with it. But, however, I don't think that I think it's just double dipping. For me, it seems a bit gratuitous. But now let's move on from the categories and the winners and all that stuff to a little bit more of the technical aspect of the show and visual things of the show. Like, for example, the envelope design this year. The envelope was white. And it had some sort of gold sticker on them with big letters for each category on the envelope. So it said Best Supporting Actress or Cinematography. So really there was no chance to have that Baron, oh my God, I can never say his name, Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway fiasco, where you get the name, pronounce the wrong name. So I mean, on that aspect it was great. And when you open the envelope, there was a giant red Oscar inside, like an Oscar statuette on the left side of the envelope. So it was really pretty inside, but I just thought it was very simple and like a new way to make sure there was no mistake made. However, I miss the days of these beautiful, sparkly, custom-made envelopes of, years past, like when Neil and Craig were the producers of the show. It just felt more special. The envelope sort of had this very glamorous thing to it, and I felt like last night it just sort of was like computer paper with a gold sticker and a red Oscar inside. It just I almost wish that they would, these little details that add to the enhancement of the show were paid attention the same way that they used to be. Because I think it really brings something to the show, which actually brings me to talking about the set, which in years past, the set at times had even felt ostentatious, to be real. I mean, with some beautiful designs, but sometimes it was a little too much, and other times it's not enough. But this year, I felt the opposite. It felt like either the budget wasn't as high. I know that it was a shorter time of Oscar season. Maybe that had something to do with it. Perhaps because most of the funding is going to the new Academy Museum. There wasn't the same budget for the show, but maybe advertisers were pulling out. But the set was, for me, a little stagnant for most of the 3.5 hours. I mean, there was a few pieces that were coming in and out and rotating, but there were no Oscar statuettes on stage besides a digital one that resembled sort of those beautiful Swarovski crystals that float in the back of the stage that would come down sort of in a curtain fashion, which were designed by Derek McLean, who beautifully designed the Oscars for a few years and actually took home some Emmys. And even like David Corns last year, for example, who does a lot of Broadway design, he had these beautiful red roses Oscar statuettes on stage, and I thought that was beautiful. And so I sort of missed that last night. I missed that there was no Oscars of any kind on the stage besides this digital image of one. And so I kept kind of waiting for them to show up on stage, and there just simply was nothing. And I will say Jason Sherwood, who is the designer for this year's Oscars, did something very unique with this moving film reel that was digital. And it kind of reminded me of the new way that the Tonys do those sets for their musical performances at the Tony Awards, because they don't have time to build a whole set and break it down for an award show. But so that was a very ingenious way to use the space, I guess, with a lower budget, and make it seem like something. But I just found it a little bit boring. There just wasn't. It looked beautiful. There wasn't enough things for me. And I think, I don't know. While it did look beautiful, I just never got that like wow moment where every time they came back from a commercial, I was like, oh, yeah, same set. Like, I like to come back from a commercial and then discover a new set piece moving in, or a new curtain moving out, or something on stage turning. I was missing that. I wish the Academy would implement like a thing where they would reuse what has looked the best in years past, like those cascading Oscars with the Swarovski crystals. They have this great deal with Swarovski, so I don't understand why not reuse. The Tonys do it, the Golden Globes do it, the Grammys do it. They all sort of recycle, and I find that sometimes the Oscars, while trying to implement all these new things, they sort of lose the storytelling of year to year, because every year is like something so new that you sort of lose things. And I think if you had a continuous design for some things that have worked in the past, you would have a much successful show. And while there were some issues, one of the things that I really thought was a missed opportunity was the whole introduction of the Academy Museum. We know it's opening December 14th, but like, they literally talked about it for maybe a minute on stage and then showed a promo clip of like a few hallways for like not even 15 seconds. And I thought that's where you had this opportunity to engage the viewer and tell them about the magic of the movies and how you can become a donor and go to the website. And you had Tom Hanks, who's the board of the governors leader. And I thought, what a missed opportunity for a show that should be capitalizing on its title of being the leader in film, the leader in motion pictures, the mecca of the top of film. I thought, wow, like, there could have been so much. There could have been a whole segment on that. And, again, cut these presenters. Like, there's no need for actors to come out to introduce another actor. Just have that main actor come out if you're going to do it with no host. I mean, to me, wasted time that could have been invested in something much greater, much better. And, yeah, so I don't know. That was my thought on it. But, anyway, those were most of my thoughts about the Academy Awards. I am not talking red carpet because I thought some of the fashions were very stale and boring, and I don't want to get in trouble because I know fashion is subjective, and what I think is fashion and what you think is fashion is totally different. But make sure that you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Carlos Clemenz. That is CarlosClemenz. And follow me, and we can have conversations about what you thought, what you liked, what you didn't like. I, again, am your talking aficionado. This is my first podcast, and I hope to have many more because I really love talking, and so I would love to engage in conversation. So again, shoot me a DM and give me your thoughts, and we can talk about them next time. Again, this is Talking Aficionado. Thanks so much for spending an hour with me, and I hope to give you new perspectives soon. Bye.